on this episode of the Security Return.
Scanning's only going to take you so far. A good attacker with a strong attacker mindset, they're always thinking outside of the box. How can I use this system that's in place? How can I not even exploit it itself, but how can I abuse its functionality to then go deeper into the network?
In this episode, we're breaking down how attackers actually get in. We're skipping scare tactics, and you'll hear real patterns we see every week. Welcome to the Security Return, powered by Kairos Sec. I'm Dr. Gerald Auger, alongside my co-host, Tyler Ramsbey, Senior Offensive Penetration Tester at Kairos Sec, and we are going to talk about how attackers really break in. Tyler, tell us, man, what are the three most common attack entry points that you're seeing getting in and working on these pen tests?
Yeah, and honestly, just picking three is going to be tough. So let me try to combine a few of these. But number one, I would say, comes down to social engineering / kind of misuse of credentials. I'm sure many people have heard of scattered spider in the news, where they use phone calls and social engineering to then compromise a set of credentials and then pivot throughout the environment as a result. So I would say number one is the human element. But alongside of that is the credential misuse side of it. It could be a guest password that is reshared. Maybe it's like you require the password changes every 90 days, the oldness guidelines, and I can do winter 2025 ! So that's a good entryway for an attacker to get into an organization. Another one would just be general misconfigurations. I think one thing that a lot of organizations don't realize is even if you don't have a CVE or a vulnerability in your environment, there's still a really good chance you have multiple different misconfigurations that a skilled attacker can chain together to either fully compromise your environment or do lateral movement and try to collect data. This could be VPNs that are misconfigured. Active Directory is a big component of this. AD is old, right? A lot of organizations implemented it 15, 20 years ago. And there's a lot of technical debt in Active Directory and misconfigurations that have allowed me, on honestly, every network assessment I've done, I've been able to become the domain admin from either no access or low privilege access, all due to misconfigurations. And if I had to give a third one, I would say forgotten assets, or even the concept of shadow IT. So you can't secure what you don't know you own. So it could be an old switch that people don't realize about, some old server that's running like Windows Server 2012 that's vulnerable to something like Eternal Blue that people just aren't aware of. And so if an organization doesn't have a good way of knowing, hey, this is what we actually own, well, as an attacker, I'm looking for those low-hanging bugs and trying to figure out what is my initial entryway into this environment. And that is same with real threat actors as well. They're looking for things that you have forgotten that are not secure, and they're using that as a pivot point to then exfiltrate and enter your network at a deeper level.
Yeah, it's so frustrating as a CISO. I like to buy tech and put in newest and latest and greatest, but these challenges that are the common ones that you're seeing, it sounds like it's more about process and about consistent vigilance by the workforce, not so much people in my office. That's a tough one. But I will tell you, Tyler, I've invested, just like many CISOs and CIOs, into very good defense stacks, right? The security stack, different technologies. Why are these traditional defenses that I have not necessarily up to snuff to help protect our organization from pen testers and attackers that have the skills that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it would be good to define our terms. In the traditional pen test, the primary goal is not to bypass some of those protections, right? So for a pen test, it's much more of a partnership between the pen tester and the client, more of a purple team. So for those who don't know what purple team is, it's the red team working with the blue team, but the blue team is fully aware of what is going on. So in a traditional pen test, we're not focusing on bypassing all of those different components. In a red team engagement, that's when we would emulate more of an APT or a nation state actor advanced persistent threat and focus on bypassing that. So just wanted to set my terms first, but then to answer the actual question, you can have the best security stack in the world, but if few different things aren't in place, it's not going to protect you. The one thing you need to keep in mind is a good attacker. So not just someone trolling through the internet looking for low-hanging targets, but someone who is targeting your organization. If they are skilled at what they do, they can just live within the noise. You have a large organization, you have a bunch of different employees, and a skilled attacker is able to see kind of the baseline activity and do what's called living off the land. They're not using some crazy exploit they find out on the internet. They're using tools and processes already in the environment to stay under the radar. So that's a big part of it. But the other big part of it, and I used to be a senior analyst on the blue team, so I know this personally. But even if you have like an amazing EDR, an amazing SIM, you have one pane of glass to monitor everything. Everything is a lot. And if your rules in your EDR are not tuned correctly, you're just going to get alert after alert after alert after alert. And that's where that alert fatigue comes in. So even if you have a dedicated SOC, if they're just constantly receiving alerts and their natural reaction is to ignore or it's a false positive, well, guess what? The true positives are going to sneak through. And you can have, once again, the greatest security stack. But if it's not tuned correctly, if your team members are not trained, and if your environment is not really hardened, it doesn't matter. A skilled attacker can become invisible inside of your network, establish those hooks of persistence, and it's going to unfortunately be a bad day.
Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, which I love quoting and love thinking about because I think it was really seminal and applies today, especially in a situation where we're talking about protecting our organization from attackers. He said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So we are talking about the threat actors, the attackers, even the pen testers simulating those attackers and how their techniques are. But talk to us about the mindset so we can kind of understand what is the thoughts in the mind of the person that we're trying to protect from.
Yeah, and every threat actor is not made equal, right? So for some, I would say the majority of so-called threat actors that are poking at environments, they're not highly skilled. And what I mean by that is they will access your environment in a few different ways. One is they're always doing scans, right? If anything is internet facing, that is your largest attack surface, whether it's a web app or a VPN portal, whatever you have set up. If it's internet facing, it's already being regularly scanned by a bunch of bots on the internet, and threat actors will use that information looking for a low hanging bug. This can be super damaging when a CVE is released. It is not initially patched, or it is patched, but your organization does not have a good patch management system in place. And all of a sudden, your internet facing asset went from secure, all of a sudden, a proof of concept exploit comes out, and now threat actors are using a VPN portal, for example, as initial entry point into your network. So just keep that in mind. A lot of threat actors are not highly skilled. They're looking for low-hanging bugs. And so if you secure your external perimeter well, that will stop a lot of threat actors, but not all of them. The more skilled threat actors are relying on the social engineering component, trying to steal credentials, setting up invisible proxies, which we could talk about maybe in another episode, going into more detail about what that looks like. But stealing those credentials from your employees or those sessions from your employees, and then what they're going to do with that is, one, they may use it to access your network, deploy ransomware, or they may sell that information on the deep web or the dark net, whatever term you want to use for it. And that's another place that we see a lot of threat actors getting entry into an environment. They're not doing the initial compromise, but they are then buying access, VPN access from other threat actors, and then they're using that to get into your environment. So as far as the attacker mindset goes, the less skilled ones, it's really the concept of a pyramid of pain. The more defenses you have in place, that's where that whole defense in depth comes in mind when you learn basic security. But the more defenses you have in place and the more painful you make it for them to get access, most of them are going to give up. For the more advanced threat actors, that's where an assumed breach pen test would come into play, where you give a pen test low-level credentials, see what they're able to do, because then you're emulating someone who maybe bought credentials from the darknet, gain access to your network via VPN. What can you do with that information? And scanning is only going to take you so far. So a lot of organizations do regular scans. They know what the vulnerabilities are, but a good attacker with a strong attacker mindset, they're always thinking outside of the box. How can I use this system that's in place? How can I not even like exploit it itself, but how can I abuse its functionality to then go deeper into the network? This could be a security product. Let's say an attacker compromises a security product that has agents on a bunch of machines in the network. It's a security product, but now in the hands of a skilled attacker, it is now a C2 or command and control framework. They can control a bunch of different machines. So not sure if that fully answers your question, but it's a tough question because really different attackers have different mindsets. And so the typical scanning is good against the attackers looking for low-hanging bugs, but you really do need a manual pen test or a red team engagement to emulate the tactics of those more advanced attackers that are going to be targeting some sensitive fields. But honestly, businesses of all sizes now are going to be in the scope of those more skilled attackers.
Yeah, definitely some scary things to consider. And as a cost center, I don't have infinite budget, and I certainly can't harden the business to the point where it's completely secure, because it would also be completely incompetent and unable to generate revenue for the business. So you got my attention, Tyler. I understand that, the low hanging, threat actors, the less sophisticated ones, they'll probably be addressed, but these more aggressive ones, these more sophisticated ones are going to be a problem. Break it down for me, man, for myself and for other business leaders who are listening. Like, what can I realistically do to kind of help manage this risk?
Yeah, great question. I think I would point back to what we talked about in the beginning. You cannot protect what you don't know you have. And so when it comes to defending your attack surface, well, you have to actually know your attack surface, which I know sounds like common sense, but I have been on the other side of things. I have managed IT departments. I shared before, I was a senior analyst on the blue team side of things before moving into the offensive security space. And it's a lot more difficult to even know your proper attack surface. So that would be number one. What you need to do is know your attack surface, know what assets are in your organization internally, know what things you have public facing on the internet, know what cloud environments you have. Make sure you have some system in place to detect shadow IT, which, to define term, shadow IT is an employee that circumvents normal IT processes, generally for a good reason. They just want to do their job better. But then it introduces software that you don't even know about that is on employees' computers that can then be exploited because there's no patch system in place to protect it. So I would say step number one, make sure you understand your actual attack surface, not just what you think it is. You can use different network mapping tools to scan that out. Honestly, if you talk to your engineering team or your blue team, they likely have ideas in place, but what's probably holding them back is they might need approval on maybe running a scan or the change control process. So honestly, step number one, communicate with the engineers, the technical people on the blue team in your organization, and get their ideas on how to understand your attack surface and view it not as an us versus them, but rather as a partnership. So that's a big one. Second one, we talked about credential misuse. So have a strong password policy in place. And I strongly recommend following the most up-to-date NIST guidelines. So without getting too nerdy and talking
Yes.
about NIST, Jerry would love it if we went deep into NIST.
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
probably
we could do a whole episode on it.
this is what Jerry reads at night just to relax. He just reads the NIST guidelines, maybe in the morning to get pumped up. But
Yep.
NIST made a big change to their password policy. For a long time, it was recommended that passwords would be rotated on a regular basis. But what many of us didn't realize is when you tell employees to update their password every 30, 60, 90 days, they're always going to take the route of least resistance. And what you think would be more secure ends up less secure, because winter 2025 exclamation mark is a different password than fall 2024 exclamation mark, but I can easily guess that information. So get your password policy up to date with the most current NIST guidelines. Look at those things so they're in place. And then when credentials are breached, rotate them. Like, that's when NIST says you should rotate them, when they are breached. And you would be surprised how many credentials are breached. That's where a password audit would be helpful. If you look at your AD environment, there's different things you can do to audit those different passwords. Once again, I would say talk to your technical blue team at your organization. They're probably well aware of this. They just need a champion in their corner to support them as they make these decisions, as they go through those scans. But that would be another thing that I would recommend. And if I could just throw in a few more, a few bonus ones.
Yeah.
Pen testing is really important. I actually don't think pen testing should be the very first thing you do, though. The first thing you should do is cover some of those low-hanging bugs in your own environment, because what I'm going to do when I get there is I'm going to spray winter 2025 exclamation mark, and I'm going to compromise a handful of accounts. It works in almost every engagement. So make my job more difficult so you get the best results for the pen test. Do that initial hardening of your environment, then pen testing is incredibly important because a scan is only going to take you so far. I think a lot of organizations would be good starting with an external pen test. That means from the perspective of the internet, what could a threat actor gain access to? And then a web app pen test is another good one because almost every organization has a web app and it has the largest attack surface. And if your external network or your web app is compromised, an attacker can then use that to pivot into your internal environment. And then most organizations' internal environments have very little defenses in place, unfortunately. But then the attacker very quickly gets keys to the kingdom. So that pen testing is important. If you have stuff in the cloud, similar thing there. AWS, Azure, GCP, those are kind of the three kings in the cloud space. But cloud can also be another attack vector that your cloud environment is compromised. And then maybe you can abuse something in the cloud to then get access to the on-prem environment. So I realized I gave a bunch of things a little bit overwhelming there, but the TLDR, the too long didn't read, my recommendation is begin by knocking out the low-hanging bugs in your environment. Work with your technical engineers on the blue team side of things. They know what they're doing and they would love to have that conversation. And then once those things are knocked out, or while you're knocking it out, schedule a pen test. A good pen testing company, a good pen test org will uncover a lot of things that you missed. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because once it is uncovered, then your team can work on remediating it. And what I recommend is doing at least an annual pen test. So you have, a year to fix the things that we found in that pen test, but a lot of things change in a year. So then the next year we do another pen test. We can confirm those things are remediated, but maybe there's other things due to systems or processes or people that we uncover. And it's much more of a partnership and working together holistically to knock out some of those vulnerabilities to help stop the threat actors in their path.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I can speak for, many of the people listening right now. I appreciate that it's not just, hey, get a pen test first, but actually get real value from a pen test by knocking out those obvious low-hanging fruit configurations and implementations. So then the real value of the pen test is showing you those kind of hidden gaps and things that real sophisticated threat actors are going to cover. Tyler, let's move to everyone's favorite segment of the show, the lightning round. We're going to give you 20 seconds on the calendar. We're going to give you 20 seconds on the clock. And you haven't seen these questions. We're going to fire them up, get going. And you got 20 seconds to go. Tyler, biggest misconception about attackers, go.
The biggest misconception about attackers, I've already mentioned this a few times, but I would say their skill level. We have this picture in mind that all these hackers are highly skilled. The majority of them are not. They're looking for low-hanging bugs. They find a low-hanging bug. They use that to get access to your environment. So most of them are not highly skilled. 2 seconds to spare. That's what I'm talking about.
All right. Next option. One security tool companies overtrust.
That's a deep question. If I had to choose one thing, I would say EDR. It's incredibly important to have it in your environment to monitor things. But like I said before, misconfiguration, alert fatigue, those kinds of things will allow an attacker to kind of slip through the cracks and compromise the environment.
All right. Next question coming in hot. Tyler, what's one low effort fix that stops real attacks?
Low effort can be defined differently. What I would say is MFA, like enforcing and enabling MFA, but I've been on the blue team MFA rollout and it may look like low effort, but oh my goodness, it's one of the hardest things to roll out. But if I had to choose one, MFA is an amazing tool. It will stop a lot of the credential reuse or you'll detect it.
All right. 100%. I've done MFA rollouts. And for anybody who's listening that's done an MFA rollout, as well as I do, you're going to get a bunch of people who saw 1,000 emails about it coming and then act like they didn't know it was coming. Next question. Most surprising entry point you've ever found?
This might be on an external network pen test. I found that forgotten asset. It was like a weird camera thing developed in a different country that had like a backdoor built into it that I found online, and it gave me root access to it, and I was able to use that to try to begin scanning their internal environment. More to talk on that, but maybe another time. I hit the time, but that was probably the most interesting one.
All right. And finally, 10 seconds with the CEO. What's one thing you'd tell them to do?
I would tell them work directly with your technical team. I think we often get a lot of us versus them between technical team and non-technical teams, and it leads to things going slowly. Your technical team is there to support you, and they want to know that you have their support as well. So whether it's a pen test or another project, the better you can form that partnership, the better it will be for your organization.
All right, and there goes our lightning round. Great job, Tyler, on that one, and a shout out to all of you who do enjoy that. In this episode, we talked about how attackers really break in and why our defenses may not be up to snuff. We covered a bunch of ideas, a bunch of thoughts, and a bunch of implementable defenses that we can implement today in our environment to reduce risk and make it unlikely for those threat actors to successfully get in. Tyler, final thoughts. What do you want someone listening, key item to take away?
The key item to take away is begin with the most basic things to protect your environment. That's having a patch system in place. That's looking at your external attack surface. If you get those things on lock, it's going to make your life a lot easier for the rest of security. And as usual, pen testing is incredibly important. And I'm a little bit biased, but I think Kairos Sec, we can provide the best pen testing services around, not just technical, but on the communication and the partnership side of things. So if you are looking for a pen test partner, hey, we would love to work with you. Reach out. We'll get back to you within 24 hours of you reaching out, and we'll schedule that initial call. We tailor all of our assessments to the organization, so we'll get a feel for what your needs actually are. We're not going to try to upsell you some crazy package, but then we'll come alongside of you and see what we can do together to help secure your environment.
And that's kairos-sec.com. There's links in the show description for this episode you can grab. You've been listening to The Security Return, powered by Kairos Sec. We'll catch you in the next episode.